that. Just waiting for people to come through. As we're doing that, I'm just going to kick things off and just wish everyone a very, very good morning. Welcome back to another webinar from our series. Hamish, is this what number is this? 16, 17?
Yeah, it must be. I think we'll call it 16, sounds about right, which is great.
It's been a lot of weeks, there's been a lot of chats, but once more we've managed to get together as the Export Recovery Panel. Coming to you on our now monthly slots to share what's happening out there in the big world. This is a panel and a webinar series that's run by exporters, for exporters to help bring insight to the fore on a Friday morning when we're all trying to plan new routes and new paths towards greater prosperity for our businesses and for ourselves and families, and of course for our country as well. In lockdown in Auckland, I'm Andy Mitchell. It doesn't look like lockdown, it's the same place I've been for all the different weeks. And likewise, free as a bird, but in the same place. Ironically, Hamish Conway. Hamish, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you, Andy. Down here in Wellington, or depends on where you are.
It is wherever you are. It's nice to be back. Well, today we're joined by three very, very special guests who are going to share quite different but interconnected views about what's happening out there in the export world at the present moment. So without further ado, I'm going to go around the panel and do as we do and ask for introductions. Julie Collins, good morning.
Morning, Julie Collins. I'm Head of Te Urarako with the Ministry of Primary Industries. That's Forestry New Zealand, but during the various COVID crises, we've worked through as a team, and so have an overview around the whole of the primary sector economy in terms of the impacts.
That's fantastic. Julie, it's lovely to have you with us all the way from the Wairarapa and on leave as well, so we're here as well. So thanks for getting up specially and staying indoors for this with us. Now we're going to cross to a different hemisphere from the Wairarapa to South Korea. Stephen Blair, good morning.
Good morning. Kia ora, everybody. Yeah, I'm Stephen Blair. I'm the Trade Commissioner based here in Seoul, so NZTE based Trade Commissioner. I've been with NZTE for about 8 years, worked in the customer side of things, as well as 4 years in Melbourne as TC there as well. So it's fantastic to join you, and thanks for the opportunity.
It's lovely. There's so many parallels between the journey that South Korea has been on with New Zealand as well. So looking forward to getting dug into that just in a little bit. And the final welcome this morning is to somebody who's been in this panel so many times that you should probably have frequent flyer points. There must be everyone. Loyalty scheme. At least, or madness, one of the two. Alistair Gates from New Zealand Post, a very good morning to you.
Hey, thanks, Andy, and morning, Hamish. Morning, everybody. So my name's Alistair Gates. I work as our General Manager of Strategic Relationships at New Zealand Post. That's and effectively what I'm doing for the business is helping to develop our international business. Yeah, thanks very much for inviting me.
Oh, it's great to have you back, Alistair. I'm looking forward to all those supply chain news and insights that you're going to bring over the coming hour. So we're going to turn first, there's people still coming into the chat, we're going to turn first to you, Stephen, please, to try to get a sense of the view from the streets of Seoul. Because as we know, South Korea is such an important export destination. It's the 5th or 6th largest export partner that we have, and fundamentally has a free trade agreement as well. Now, Seoul's been heralded in the news over here as actually a little bit of a COVID hero in the way that they've managed to keep numbers down, but critically to try to keep borders open and to keep businesses running and to try to keep BAU. But I think as we speak right now, there's a bit of resurgence as it's happening in lots of parts of the world and some more pressure coming on. So with your position right now in Seoul, what's this resurgence in COVID just doing to consumer confidence out there in the streets, Stephen?
I think there's a sense of frustration. So I think the locals here felt that they got things under control. Sort of daily counts down into almost single figures, but in the last week or so, an uptick, mainly driven by a sort of a right-wing rally that was held here a couple of weeks ago. So frustration from the team of 50 million that thought that they had done the right thing. I guess in terms of consumer sentiment, and it's similar in the current situation as it was back in sort of March. A lot of consumer activity online, a lot of consumers looking for healthy food, so anything that speaks to boosting immunity, And so I think at one stage, sources of vitamin C was one of the most searched items on the internet here. So, it's not surprising Zespri's having a record year. Some of our honey companies obviously doing well. That sort of immunity boosting sort of perception around honey. So a sense of frustration, but also I suppose a sense of hope, much like in New Zealand, where the populace feels like they've managed to beat it once. Let's do it again.
So, I mean, Seoul in itself is an extraordinary city. It's about 25 million population there, so it is an incredibly dense place to try to manage and to lock down. Like, given how freely the population's been left over the past 6 months, when the rest of us have been under tighter restrictions, what's your perspective on the size of that the consumer behaviour change that's happened in South Korea? Everywhere else in the world, lockdown has meant the rise of online, the rise of health, like you just said. Direct to home, low touch, but that's as a response to being locked down. In Korea, what's happened when people have been left pretty much to their own devices? Do we see the same consumer trends coming through?
Yeah, you do, and there's an interesting term here called untact. So it was coined back in about 2017 by sort of university professors, and it spoke to I guess more around automation. And with an aging population, reducing the human sort of component to various interactions. Now it's actually consumer driven, so there's a demand for untact, which is contactless service delivery and provision of goods and services. So it's interesting that it really has swept in. So contactless payments, delivery, and services in that way. So yeah, certainly here to stay. In terms of what that means in consumer land, you can make on a number of the platforms, you could make an online delivery at 11 o'clock at night, and it'll be at your door at 6 o'clock in the next morning. So that's what consumers demand now.
So this is, I mean, Korea has always been like 10 years ahead of everyone else in terms of digital adoption, just the nature of the investment that the government made over the last 15 to 20 years. Do you think the way that they're going with this trend is something which the rest of the world is going to catch up with very quickly through COVID, in terms of like super focus on home delivery?
Well, I think whether they catch up or whether they continue to chase Korea. So the government in the last month or so just announced its Digital New Deal, which is a 5-year plan, and the amounts of money that they're pumping into things like AI, 5G, robotics and the like. So this trend will only continue. So yes, I certainly think the rest of the world will continue to follow. This is in a country, as you pointed out, that has the highest penetration rates of mobile phones. It has the fastest internet speed. And so all these trends are on the base off a very high level already.
Yeah, they're going to go. So it's like, I mean, Korea is such an interesting partner, but often overlooked by New Zealand exporters. Although it's incredibly important for the primary sector, which we'll talk about in a second, it doesn't necessarily come top of mind for many potential exporters. We've been buoyed by the conversation over the past probably 6 or 8 weeks about the potential of a bubble. But alongside Singapore, South Korea, potentially, and Australia. I mean, plainly Australia that's gone straight off the table because of the situation with our friends and partners over there. Is there still some hope in the way that the government is leading the recovery over there, that they could be an early bubble partner for New Zealand?
Well, certainly it's something that the South Korean government is keen on, because the companies like Samsung, who have large plants in Vietnam, Lotte, who has chemical plants around the world, what they're looking for is actually business travel rather than tourism travel. So travel of essential workers and business workers. So it's certainly certainly something that the South Korean government's keen on. Obviously, we've got our own systems in place back in New Zealand, but I would think, given that it's there are direct flights, Air New Zealand still flying here once a month, Korean Air once a month direct. It's certainly a viable possibility.
Yeah, so even though the flights are coming back, the reality for anybody doing business in Korea, just like anywhere else in the region, is still low touch. Now, Korea as a culture demands a very different set of protocols and respect and formality than you might use in other trading partners in the region. Is there a particular challenge with conducting business remotely inside South Korea at the present moment? Is what do we as exporters have to learn about this new norm of low touch business in the region?
Oh, I think maintaining the connections that you've got, so on Zoom or Skype or Microsoft Teams or whatever. So staying in touch, showing that you're on the journey with them. Certainly, utilizing NZTE if you're a customer of NZTE, or if you want to, jump on my NZTE website. Certainly, the representation that we have in market as NZ Inc. Is certainly appreciated by New Zealand exporters. So the boots on the ground, the face-to-face meetings that we are able to have here, do certainly go a long way to keeping those relationships alive.
Yeah, I guess it's really important to remember not to, you're never alone walking into those markets. It might be more difficult, but there's a really good connection to try to reach out with. Hamish.
Can I just ask a question there, Stephen? In terms of in these times where we can't get on a plane, go to Korea and perhaps look at the traditional channels of selling through retailers, and obviously with more and more people buying online, like for some of the people listening here, they'll be thinking, okay, how my products work with e-commerce really well. How could I get those into e-commerce channels in Korea? Like, how would people start to go about that side of things?
Well, certainly some research on what the platforms are, and we can help with that. Essentially, there's sort of three different levels. There's the cross-border sort of almost. So there's the Naver, which is your Trade Me version. There's the social. So the next one down is sort of your social group. So like a Groupon, which the Korean version of that is Coupon. And then the third level is your big retailers that have their websites, and so Shinsegae and Lotte. So understanding the platforms that are there, but it all goes back to what your strategy is as well. So it's being really clear about who you're targeting, where they hang out, how they buy, will drive, I think, what your channel strategy is, and especially when it comes to digital.
Okay, and what's it like from a regulatory point of view? So if you've got food products or health-related products, like how difficult is it to meet those compliance requirements?
Oh, it's depends on the product, but in general, look, I mean, South Korea is in the ease of doing business index is 7th. Now okay. we usually rate 1 or 2 in the world. Now that's because there are rules and regulations here. Now some of them seem tough, but there is a process that you can work through, and working with MPI colleagues and customs, you can work your way through those. So there is a system, and especially if your products or your ingredients are well known, they've been tested before, you could probably get through that certification process in less than 3 months. If it's brand new and you've got some health claim that you're tagging to this, you're probably looking more 6 to 12 months. It's the same for everybody. The rules are the same for everybody. Everybody else needs to step through those. And as I say, with the support of MPI, the support of NZTE, certainly can get through.
Yep, fantastic.
It's just like, so Julie, if I can just turn to you for a second on this when we're talking about MPI. Part of your responsibility inside MPI is the forestry sector, and it's almost, after speaking to Stephen about the experiences in a country that's had its impacts shut down so late, the forestry sector in this country is the opposite. The forestry sector got hit first and got hit hard as a third biggest export earner. That was almost the canary in the coal mine of the impact inside this country. Can you give us, we haven't touched upon forestry at all in this series, and could you just give us an outline of what's happened since those first lockdowns? Do you remember the news reports from places like Gisborne, and when the entire community was basically just closed down because forestry stopped, the ship stopped. How fast is recovery coming back? Is there reason for optimism inside those communities and inside the sector right now?
Well, I think it's tracking similar to the rest of the primary sector. So that we saw a big bounce back on forestry and prices. As soon as we got out of alert level 4, prices went up really high to around $140 a cubic metre for export logs, and they were tracking about 125 before lockdown. And then once that big price spike went up, you then saw things settling down around to where they are now, around 114 New Zealand dollars a cubic metre. So that's sort of how we've seen other primary sectors track, which is at the commodity end of the market. You've seen prices spike and then sort of, when concerns were about supply, and then track down to a sort of lower level than we saw this time last year. And the outlook globally is for commodity prices to keep on tracking down. Now, that's because from a global point of view, what we're seeing globally is the impact on countries cushioned because of the fiscal stimulus that's gone into those economies. So either monetary policy, quantitative easing, or wage subsidies. So we've not seen the hit on consumer spending yet, and that's projected to come slightly lower as countries have to pull back on those fiscal policies. So we anticipate that commodity prices will keep on tracking down as you get more people uncertain about jobs, lower income. So those commodity prices that go into ingredients or into manufacturing, there'll be downward pressure on those. Alternatively, we've seen an increase in prices for stuff that goes into the higher end. So for forestry, for example, people's order books are really full for stuff that's going into the DIY markets in the USA. They can't get enough of the clearwood componentry because everybody's stuck at home. They've experienced their house in lockdown. They want to either buy a new house or expand or change their existing house because it's not work for them when they've been in it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So commodities that are going through processed goods which are going through that route have actually they're just going bananas and people can't get enough of them. So at the moment, the forestry sector's doing quite well. The question is, I think, on everybody's lips is what's going to happen in 3 months' time, and that's the challenge. With that, what's that long-term outlook for those global markets?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially since the trend for the next quarter for the commoditized side of the market is to have prices going down. Is there, given that we're entering this period of volatility when we're even a primary sector like the forestry sector is responding to consumers' needs, which are driven by COVID, when we could all relate to the being at home and looking at your house, working out the things you still got to do.
Yeah.
Long list in this place to tell you. It's like most of them not done still, but it's like we can all relate to that. How fit are we as a sector in New Zealand to be agile to those quite rapidly changing demands that are coming from the more consumer end of the markets? Do we have the right infrastructure in place to be able to turn this situation into a real global competitive advantage?
I think it's something that we're going to need to focus on over the next 3 to 5 years, and I think we've got a window to get there. I think in some sectors we're better placed than others. I mean, you mentioned kiwi fruit. Kiwi fruits just had a record year and went gangbusters over the break because consumers were looking for healthy goods, and the route to market was through the supermarkets. So where we've seen sector struggle, like venison and seafood, is where their primary market was food service, i.e. restaurants and hotels and accommodation, and that tourism sector has just taken a huge hit globally. And even though it's coming back, you've still got a large part of the population that's still pretty much working from home, being very cautious about going out to restaurants, while the young are going out and partying. You've got, the people with the money, 40, 30 people with young families or getting in their older age where you've got that disposable income are staying at home. And the other thing that you've got springing up, especially in the States, is that, and it goes with what Stephen was saying online, is these community food groups who are really trying to source high quality, healthy food, and they're happy to pay for it. Because what you saw in the States with COVID being spread through a lot of the manufacturing capability, meat plants and other manufacturing, you saw a real breakdown in the food supply chain and supermarkets struggling to keep their shelves stocked. So I think there's real opportunities for New Zealand in terms of playing into, rather than the commodity sector, which we think there's going to be downward pressure on, into those higher value food markets where attributes around New Zealand farming systems can really play to the fore. But I think there's work we need to do to get there.
Yeah, so this is kind of leads us on to, we'll look back to those higher value opportunities later on. If I'm just picking up what you said a minute ago about the challenge of emerging channels, because part of the impact that we're all grappling with here is that the way that people consumed and the relative size and utility of different channels has fundamentally changed, and new channels arriving, like those community sourcing groups. Now, Alistair, just turning to you, it's like all the way through this, New Zealand Post has been plainly at the forefront of the reality of the shift to direct to consumer or direct to home, and you've just launched a new town hall presentation, which helps us to understand better just the quantum of impact in this from New Zealand, so we as exporters can actually understand just how fundamental this shift is. If it's possible, would like you to share some of the highlights from that, so that the audience can get a feel for actually this direct to consumer thing is actually, it's big and it's here to stay. So
thanks, Andy. So just checking you can hear me. Fantastic. So so what I'm going to send you now is a link to all. Many of you may have already seen it, but this is something that our business marketing department put together at New Zealand Post, and it's been going for a few years now. So after this call, you can download the full business download, which is an e-commerce review taken from 2019 versus 2018. And what I'm going to do this morning is, just for 5 or under 10 minutes, we'll just take you through some of the key highlights of what our business marketing department have put together. It's got case studies. You can go onto their email distribution list, and also they put out monthly updates as well. So if you want to stay in touch with what's going on in New Zealand as far as e-commerce and whatnot, it's a great free guide that you can use. So I'm just checking you can see the download there, Andy.
We can't as yet from this.
You can't yet. I'm just going to click on it now. Okay, sharing now, just to make sure we can see it.
I can see myself.
So is that working now?
It's the scary thing, yeah. I can see me, so we should be all right if you can change your screen.
So I've changed it now. Just checking you can see the presentation now. Not yet.
I can see me seeing me.
Oh, okay. Let me. Sorry about that. If I'll give it one more shot, otherwise we'll go to Hamish if I can't get it going. Sorry about that. Oh, here we go. Found it. Here we go. Found it, guys. Sorry about that.
That's all right. All right.
Just checking now.
We're on.
Great. So look, I think this slide really is a fantastic summary. It's a little bit hard to read on the screen, but effectively what it's saying is, online spending with Kiwis are spending up 17% versus 2019 versus 2018. 10% of all retail business in New Zealand is now bought online. So $4.7 billion. So it's a tremendous amount of spend. It's growing. What I'll later in the presentation, I'll talk to you about how over the peak periods and over the Black Fridays and the cyber season, there's been tremendous growth there. People are spending more per transaction. People are buying more per year. we'll talk a little bit about the buy now, pay later phenomenon, where that's effectively grown, doubled in the space of a year. People are looking for credit. People want to buy things now. They don't want to get credit cards. They'd rather pay it off by, 4 installments. We'll have a quick look at what the differences of types of products that people are buying. Interestingly, South Island is growing faster than North Island, which is interesting. But effectively, just to not to give too much away, but effectively half of the New Zealand adult population is now buying goods online. So a quick summary, just go through a few more. As I said, all this whole presentation you can download. I think really what I found really interesting about this slide was there's a thing called super shoppers. So if you're, be it New Zealand super shopper, so 9% of online shoppers, just the 9% of them spend 41% of the spend. So if you think about that, it's almost like, it's almost half, if you're rounding up. So if you are selling online, you want to be targeting what we term as super shoppers. So I think that was something that really jumped out at me. Now I'm assuming that super shoppers also exist in Australia. They also exist offshore. So I'm sure it's not just a New Zealand phenomenon. If we look here, I think here what it's really saying is if you're basically under 75, a high percentage of all, from adult age to 75 are buying online. And if you actually look, it's actually pretty even. I mean, sure, between age 30 to 34, 30 to 44 is the biggest group that are shopping online, but effectively there's not too much difference. Of course, over 75 are probably less, but just interesting to say that it's what I'm trying to say is it's through all age categories. People are now buying online. What are we buying? Online clothing and footwear, that's still the big one, both for export and import. I work in our import department as well. There's a lot of clothing coming in, but of course, because of COVID and even this is actually pre-COVID. Remember, this is 2019. Food, groceries, and liquor was going up close to 20%. Now, I'm going to show you something. Of course, over COVID, you'll see a huge growth compared to where it was. But yeah, so just that's your typical what people are buying. If we look at here now, here's some interesting stats. Auckland, third of the population, so they're spending a third. North Island, 3/4 online spenders from the North Island. But as I mentioned again, if you look at that, but basically 20% growth in the South Island. So that means South Islanders, probably are not able to get the goods that they want or what need more variety, and so that they're able to purchase online to get what they need. A side topic now into international. China's still, 36% of the goods that Kiwis are buying are from China, and as I mentioned on earlier calls, we're seeing a transformation away from, so that's your Alibabas, that's your Wishes, that's your eBays. Before they would be sending those goods air freight. Now about half of those goods by air freight. So Hong Kong Post, China Post, New Zealand Post, and my clients are now using ocean freight. So you will have noticed an additional increase in your transit times from goods bought from China, and that's the way you've got to keep the prices down. Air freight's gone up, 3 or 4 times per kilo. So if you're going to buy a $10 watch strap, you can't spend $10 on freight. So it's just basic economics. But also interestingly, so what are the big markets? It's the obvious: Australia, UK, and US. And of course, the big thing to watch out for, of course, is Amazon. It's going to be really exciting. We'll see that space, for when they open up in New Zealand and currently operating in Australia. So just moving on, just to go through a few more summary points here. So what I want to talk about are these event days. Is the peak now is longer. So whereas from now till Christmas, we're already seeing increased demand. 10-15% more than the year before. Yes, that might be COVID related, but at the same time, just peak period is going to be longer and more goods being sold. So you just can look at those statistics. It's 23% growth. 20. In every way, it's high. Growth there. And just keep in mind now, if you're shipping offshore, the air freight business is still very fragile. Okay, so you'd be looking at Air New Zealand, Airlines, Cathay, Emirates. You can name all the big, but at any minute one could drop out, and one might come in. Freight prices are expensive, especially going into peak. Non-peak, we face a little bit of we're facing issues with getting uplifts. So just keep that in mind. Talk to your freight broker about your air freight and making sure that you've got uplift capability. I won't go through this whole slide. I think what this retailer perspective is really, if I was going to nut it down into a couple of comments, it's pressure on margin. Online retail is great, but of course people shop online because they want it to get it cheaper. So retailers are facing reduced margins, and of course higher freight costs don't help that. Okay, and then also just there was a mention of buy now, pay later. So that's huge. When something doubles in a year, I can only imagine it could potentially double again this year. So it's exponential growth in that credit. So I'd be talking to buy now, pay later operators saying, how can we work together? And if they, we can give you a 10% discount if you do a buy now, pay later type deal or whatnot. So something certainly we're exploring as a business as well. What's the highlights here? I think I won't really say too much on this slide other than to say, just go through groceries, liquor, fashion. Just these are the types of goods that are being bought. I'll move on. On this slide, what I found interesting is returns. It's still, you've got to have good return structure, especially online. There are a lot of returns, both internationally and domestically when we buy. We'll buy 2 pairs of shoes because we'll try 2 different sizes and one will get returned. So making sure that's working, and also getting more personal. If they certainly know who you are, by cookies and having that personal relationship with your customer. Certainly Shimano fishing reels know all about me, and I get their ads every day. If we look at the sectors again, what this is just showing is the growth. So if you look at online versus retail, clothing and footwear, 36%, but actual shop front only growing 1%, and food and liquor again growing, and electronics. And here's what's interesting, right? So we've gone through COVID now, and effectively online spend went up 30%. Okay, so of course people are at home, they can't go to the shops, so it would seem natural. Before, the online spend used to be 10% of share of wallet, now it's 11.6%, and we only see that getting higher and higher. And I think just to finish, I think what an interesting slide for me, an interesting statistic for me is during the last 6 months, 172,000 people that had never shopped online in New Zealand started shopping online. So I think that is we're a small country, so 172,000 is a game changer there, and basically I don't have us going back now to level 3. But again, you'll see that because I don't have the data, but if you go on to as I said, to the full download and go on to those monthly statistics, you'll see this chart, July, August. I can assure you our imports have been going up, and I can tell you now, as of last week and the week before, because of Alert 3, our volumes are up 10-15%. So because we're back in level 3. So thanks very much, Andy. I hope there was some interesting stuff there for everybody.
Alistair, that's extraordinary. And just for everybody, the link to that is in the chats, and I do urge you all to download the full reports and to really go through the data and to work out what it means for you. I mean, it's like, because plainly what we're looking at here with evidence from our own country here, which we can all relate to as consumers ourselves before business people, is just how different our behaviour has changed and what the impact is for our businesses. Just Hamish, you're the Amazon expert on this. Is this same changing behaviour reflected, say, in Amazon's business in the US?
It is, and the stats that I was looking at there, based on was it Statista, they were showing Amazon is up 25%, and that's off a huge base, and so the impact of that has been like 172,000 people in New Zealand buying on Amazon or buying online for the first time. In America, literally it's the same, but obviously times whatever the multiple is there, and it's literally, I heard an American person say, COVID's taught baby boomers how to buy on Amazon was the comment, and of course, but there's a huge strain on Amazon's warehouses now, so they do things like limit the amount of stock you can send in, and they're more a distribution center than a warehouse now. So there is this need for having a 3PL that you've got your stock in, that you can send some to Amazon, have some for your own online sales as well. And that's actually one of the big things we've seen is those that were set up in the US with their own online store as well, their sales have gone tremendously well. And that's been, some of the expectation on delivery timeframes has changed from customers, like they understand things are taking a bit longer. And so, but they've been, looking to people's websites, and people's own web sales have gone. So it's like the two are working hand in glove more as well. So
this complexity of actually having to have 3PL, because you can't just, you're not just sending it straight to channel. I mean, Julie, from your perspective inside primary, surely this creates immense complexity if you're dealing with products which are perishable or inside cold chain. We're effectively lengthening or putting an extra step into the supply chain. How's the primary sector reacting to that? Is this a barrier or an opportunity?
I think it's both. I mean, you talked a bit about air freight. So for perishable goods, one of the biggest issues for New Zealand is being able to get goods out of the country into market in a timely manner, and the costs also gone through the roof because there's less options. So it's not so bad if you're going into markets where our planes are flying to, but our planes aren't flying to direct or the number of markets that there used to be. So for perishable goods, I think there's some real challenges around how you get your goods to market. But there's also some great upside, because as I mentioned earlier, people online are looking for goods with from a food point of view, with high health characteristics, high quality characteristics. If it's at the upper end, they're looking around environmental and animal welfare credentials, and New Zealand's really well positioned to be able to take advantage of that. But COVID has completely disrupted traditional supply chains, and you really need to pay attention to how your routes to market will operate.
Yeah, because those routes to market could have get unexpectedly longer, which could change everything. Stephen, from your perspective inside Korea, this move to direct, certainly we touched on before, but what interested in your perspective on the opportunity for primary producers from New Zealand with Korea and actually moving up the value ladder. Are we seeing that greater demand for the credentials that our products have, the security of foods, the sustainability of it, the ethics, and everything else? Is that showing through in the pool that consumer demand is happening, or in a wealthy, well-structured, well-run, well-governed country like Korea? Is it not as acute a call for brand New Zealand as you might have, say, in China with less food security?
It's still key, and it's still the food safety and security and where it comes from is key. So New Zealand's overall brand position is very strong. So all the great work that we've done across the years around promoting New Zealand as a great place to visit, great place for a holiday, a great place to go to school, that all builds towards a safe, secure provider of food. And as Julie said, on top of that, then you've got the environmental side of things. There's things that we don't or haven't traditionally dialed up in a market like this because we think that people understand it. So grass-fed beef is really important here, but we don't talk about that all that often because, of course our cows and animals eat grass, but that's something that they want a sticker on the label to talk about. So knowing the consumers and knowing what's important to them, I think is really important too.
Yeah, it's going back to that. Now Alice, sorry,
there's a question here that kind of relates a bit to this. Is there, and it says like for South Korea, is there any push by the Korean government to buy Korean made? And is that having a negative impact on New Zealand products?
No push by the Korean government for that, and so no negative connotation or feedback for New Zealand. However, there's a trade war between Korea and Japan going on. Yeah. There is some tensions obviously with China as well, but mainly on the Japan side of things. So consumers will make their own decisions, but New Zealand is really well placed in that. The Koreans the Korean country demands. It needs food. It can't produce everything that it consumes. So we're in a really good, strong position for that as well.
So just picking up on this, on the trend for buy local, which we've talked about a lot on this podcast. Julie, plainly we're a small country and we only produce so much. So it's like we can find those niche markets. But is the global trend towards being more self-centered and the trend to buy local, is this something which we should be concerned about, or is the strength of brand New Zealand and the quality of our primary produce actually strong enough to push us through this problem?
I think it's something you need to keep an eye on, but actually a lot of the markets that we export into are net importers of food, so they're not self-sufficient. And New Zealand's brand is really strong, and I think the promotion that NZTA and MPI did over lockdown around keeping the profile of New Zealand and New Zealand food up was actually really helpful. I think there's more, as we mentioned before, we can do to exploit that higher end of the market, and how New Zealand's managed COVID plays right into that whole narrative for New Zealand around being a safe place to do business, having strong rules in place, good food safety, and now good health outcomes. So that sort of all plays into that narrative, and we need to leverage off that and pushing into that high end market.
It feels like we're talking about opportunity here. It's like we've got, especially from a primary sector point of view, we've got what the world wants. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, no, that absolutely. We do have what the world wants, but we need to make sure we maintain our brand and we don't let ourselves down around, we do have some Achilles heels around water quality and some of the other stuff on the side, and we do need to make sure we manage that. But yeah, there is a lot of upside for New Zealand primary produce if we can actually take advantage over it over the next period of time.
Yeah, so Stephen, from a Korean perspective here in brand New Zealand, are there other sectors apart from primary and food and beverage that are also getting a nice sustained lift from this perception of us as being a fair, well-governed, in-control country?
Well, I've been pleasantly surprised by the success of a range of New Zealand companies outside of F&B in recent times. So one is Omio. Who would have thought that we would be exporting autonomous vehicles from New Zealand to Korea? So this isn't something that's happened overnight, but they were commissioned during our lockdown in New Zealand. So the team from Omio did that remotely. New Zealand's biggest investor into Korea is actually Skyline, so the luge company, and they just opened their 4th track down in Tongyong. It's the longest luge ride in the world. So again, it's what a fantastic Kiwi innovation for anybody that's bombed down the hill in Rotorua or Queenstown. Yeah. It's fantastic. SIF Technologies out of Christchurch. They make measuring and monitoring equipment for air quality. So they work with Samsung around semiconductor development. You've got Hamilton Jet who supply the Coast Guard and have had a fantastic year here. So beyond food and beverage and into technology as well and other services. We've had some real success in recent times, which is I guess one of the things, and it goes to what Hamish sort of brought up before around when we're talking around buy local. The thing that I would really encourage New Zealand companies to think about is, not only is it made in New Zealand, but it's made for Korea. So you are really targeting an end user, a consumer here with a product that is going to make it in the market, versus having something and trying to wander around the world to try and find somebody to buy it.
Yeah, it comes back to the basics, doesn't it? It doesn't matter what's happening out there. You still have to have good market fits. It's still essential.
Absolutely. The fundamentals and do not change. Knowing who your customer is, having a really strong value proposition and a strategy and channel strategy to support that don't change.
Exactly. And part of those fundamentals is working out what the supply chain into that country is going to be. Alistair, today we've talked a lot about how unpredictable it is, or it remains unpredictable. Yeah. What should we be looking out for in the next 4 to 6 weeks from a supply chain and a connectivity point of view?
My best guess is that it will remain stable. There was a question about what will prices be like, or when will they come down. Our view will be they'll hold steady till the end of the year. If anything, they may peak up a little bit. So if you look at the UK, you can get to the UK for $7 a kilo, but on a bad day, you can only get there for $12 a kilo. So you do get these spikes. It's the same with China. So my view is, everyone used to use Cathay or Air New Zealand. Look at Pacific Airways. Look at going via Sydney. The other way is, of course, look at Ocean if you can. But of course, you'd be surprised. Clients, can wait a month. As it's been proven the other way around from China. And just to finish on that, it's up to the passenger flights. 90% of air cargo into New Zealand was on passenger flights, and so by sort of volume. So if our passenger flights are down 90%, it's just until we open up bubbles, hopefully Taiwan, Korea, whichever countries we can open up with, Australia. Then of course, the more passenger flights, the cheaper the freight costs will be.
So going into thinking about this, we're going into key selling periods here because we're the third and fourth quarter of the year. There's little likelihood of those domestic flights increasing, but our need to access freight is going to go up and up and up. Yeah. Are we looking at a bit of a throttle here in our ability to access the world?
Potentially, and that's why you really want to start that conversation now with your freight forwarder, because it's not going to be you talking to them, and yeah, look, I'm quietly confident. I mean, we've been through Alert 4, we went through, I think that you won't get the same panic that we had back in March and April. We've gone through another Alert 3. New Zealand post service levels haven't been that detrimental compared to where we were Alert 4, if you remember the press. So I think we're more experienced now to handle it for sure.
Certainly. Julie, what's your experience at the moment inside your sector in terms of accessing the right and most affordable supply connections for primary?
It sort of echoes what Alistair said. Air freight for those perishable goods has become a lot more expensive. So for those products where the margins are okay, they've been able to get their goods to market. But for some others, it's priced their export markets out from them, especially in the horticulture sector. Think tomatoes, where the margins aren't that huge. Sea freight's also an issue, so even if you're thinking about switching to sea freight, you need to actually do your homework and talk to your freight forwarder. So initially we saw sea freight becoming a lot cheaper after the lockdown, as boats they sort of do a circuit around the world, I think. So they sort of, certainly for forestry, they come in, they bring goods into Southeast Australia, then Southwest Australia, then take grain from Western Australia through to the eastern seaboard, and then they come across to New Zealand, fill up with logs, take that up to China and go elsewhere. But what we've seen is freight becoming cheaper as they tried to keep those boats moving, and the New Zealand exchange rate dropped. But now some of those shipping companies are beginning to park up excess capacity, and freight's becoming more expensive. So there's fewer ships, and the routes are beginning to change. So talk to your freight forwarder, because it's not as easy as it was.
Certainly not easy at all. A question for you, Stephen, is like, do we just have to accept now that export is unpredictable and more risky and potentially more costly? Is this just us experiencing the new norm, so we can only access markets where we can have a buffer to allow us to trade through these variable cost problems?
Oh, I think I take my hat off to anybody in business and anybody who's an exporter. It's never been easy, so I mean that's why we have organisations like NZTE, why we have companies like Catapult, why we have services such as Export Essentials at NZTE to help with the realities of export. So I think good planning, and as you're saying, starting to talk strategy, talking the logistics and the costs involved, and building out a good plan. Having some flexibility in that plan, I think, is useful. But also, backing yourself too. There was a question there from Maria about why some New Zealand companies haven't got traction in a country like Korea in the past, and that's because you can't dabble in some of these things. So what you've got to really commit quite often to a market, to a strategy, resource it, and back yourself with the partners that you've got around you.
Yeah, entirely. So it's like, in terms of a real theme over all the weeks we've been doing this, Hamish and I, just around the number of partners, people getting together. The whole team of 6 million actually it's a reality from Kia all the way through. So are there just around the table here, are there particularly valuable sources of information and insights at the moment that you'd like to connect people to? With you, Julie, first, if you're in the primary sector, where should people be looking for very regularly for advice and updates?
So NZTE's website, so as one of the things that we've done over lockdown, we've had fortnightly meetings with our primary industry sector, with NZTE and MFAT, to talk about what the trade implications are, and we've put all the latest information on the NZTE's website so people can access that in one logical place, and that gives the latest that we've got in terms of trends, data, intelligence in terms of the exporting sector.
Perfect. Alistair, from a logistics point of view, is there anything, maybe what do we have behind the scenes at NZ Post or elsewhere? Where do you turn to for your insights?
Sure. I mean, one of them is just echoing Julia. The NZTE website also puts up all the flights. So if you want to see what actually are the flight schedules, and then it lists all the freight forwarders, it's a great resource. Something we were using during Alert 4. Of course, the full download if you want to have a look at that. But I think that the best knowledge, of course, just comes from the logistics people on the ground. Talk to your sales manager. They know. I often call other freight forwarders just to ask if I'm not seeing something. Are there other flights out? And so we are working together to make sure we get freight out of New Zealand.
Great. Stephen, from your point of view, and especially like from an economic point of view as well, part of the role of being a trade commissioner, you're looking at the big picture as well as the country. What are your picks or places to look for insight and support?
Oh well, I'll talk Korea. Obviously, I think the OECD has indicated that this is the country that will come out, the quickest and with the lowest dip. So it's an economy that is open for business. So certainly, I would talk that up. I think a range of sectors, as I've talked about, beyond our traditional F&B and into technology. So the tech side of things is really exciting here. So and then just on that partners side of things, I just reinforce obviously NZTE and the website, but here in Korea we have a fantastic Kiwi business chamber. So there's a network of New Zealanders here, from HR to legal and the like, and the Korea New Zealand Business Council back in New Zealand, who has some great connections. So there's some great partners that are willing to be on the journey with you.
Exactly. You shouldn't do this alone. And also an interesting reminder from Maria, just saying that on the My NZTE resource is pretty amazing as well. You can register to access a lot of extra information, she says, that may not be on the websites, and it can be personalized for your own interest as well. So sometimes it's easy to forget the resources which have always been there right in front of our nose. So yeah, don't forget the My NZTE site. You'll find it.
Absolutely, Andy. I'm just going to say that our team here contributes to that weekly. So our insights, we're taking those directly from the market and plugging those into our website.
Perfect. Hamish, according to my clock here, we're at the very, very top of the hour. is there any last questions or reflections from you before we wrap up and get
Well,
easy working?
I think some points that Stephen made in terms of who is the product for, and I think this whole just getting clear on your strategy, and who is it, lining it up for that market. And also what I was thinking as well is tying that in around freight. So maybe you've got your products, but actually to make the freight work, you need to do a different pack size, or just really think through that to make it more freight friendly, and it could absolutely be worth the effort. And we often do this with clients who want to sell on Amazon. They come with, we've got product A, but it's actually, well, that won't work given the margins, but let's do a product B, and hey, now the margins are working and you've got some room there to wiggle. So I think as long as people don't just think, I've got my product, who wants it? I think it's like, what's in the market? What do they need? How can I make my product work for that? I think more strategic thinking around that needs to happen, rather than just trying to flog product out into the world. So that's what I've picked up from today.
You might just have made freight friendly a thing. I'm into that now. I like the idea. I'm gonna
Really, there you go.
freight friendly. You heard it here first. I just wanted, we've got to wrap this up. So it's the top of the hour. New Zealand needs to go on and get back to work, and do some amazing things. So I just want to go around the table one more time as we do, because what we're looking for here are points of optimism and shoots. So I'd just like to say thank you to Julie Collins for joining us when you're on leave and hoping the wire wrap. But Julie, it's been lovely having you with us today. Could you just give us a reason to be cheerful amidst all the chaos at the present moment?
Oh, look, I think New Zealand economy is doing, and New Zealand producers are doing fantastically well compared to globally. And I think there's real opportunities in that higher value market end, really focusing on what the key trends are around consumer purchasing and behaviour over the next period of time. New Zealand's got some great products that could really actually play into that.
Yeah, it's great. We've got what the world wants, Julie. That's lovely.
Absolutely. Yeah, both food and fibre. And if you put climate change on top of that, there is real opportunities for New Zealand going forward.
Let's go and do it. Alistair, it's always fantastic having you here. Thank you so much for your really, really up-to-date insights, and thank you for sharing that. The data that's come out from the rest of the business is hugely valuable. Give us a reason to be cheerful from the chaos and complexity of logistics at the moment.
Thanks, Andy. I got three reasons. People want to trade. Businesses want to trade. People want to buy goods. People will pay. Your consumers will pay for shipping. So don't let that be a stop for your business. But also, we've been here before. I think people are a lot more experienced. We're all working together. So no, we're very optimistic till the end of the year.
Oh, it's great. Alistair, thank you for those words. Again, just remembering that, consumers want what we want, and if you can get them to pay for and what it takes to get them there, they value that as well. It's all part of the service. And finally, Stephen, thank you so much for joining us so early this morning, from your side, and for helping us to focus on this market, which, although is already hugely important, actually should be on our short list for most of us, given where it is and how it's recovering. Give us a couple of reasons to be cheerful, from your view on the streets of Seoul this morning.
Oh, look, New Zealand brand has never been stronger. So all the things that we do every day back in New Zealand, they resonate with consumers, with end users here. So just keep on doing the great work, because there is a market here, as Julie and Alistair have said, that are willing and able to consume our products. Not only now, but we have also the solutions, I think, for the problems in the future as well, whatever they might be. So, great time to be a Kiwi, and great time to be a Kiwi business.
All right, we're going to end on that point. If that doesn't inspire us, I don't know what will. So from Hamish, free as a bird, and me locked down, and from Julie, Alistair, and Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be 3 more weeks of interviews coming up, and then at the end of the month, again, we'll be live with another wrap-up from around the world. Until then, stay safe, and we will see you all very soon. Good morning.
Great. Thanks, Stephen, Julie, Alistair. Appreciate it.